Thank you, everyone, and welcome back to the Elevate Your Best podcast. My name is Michael Dankloffs. So today we are actually delving into this thing that I have a fair amount of experience in, and it's called self-sabotage. So self-sabotage is, for me, the idea of making choices that we know are going to lead us in the wrong direction. So for me
Just not to
personally,
stay, just not to stay behind, Michael. I do have a lot of experience with self-sabotaging as well. So we are gonna have a big bowl to share with the audience right now. Lots of mistakes that you might not fall to because we already did, and we are gonna share our experience with you.
and there's this idea that people who have actually gone very far have always done things right. And I would have to disagree with that. The people who you see that are successful out there have gotten there because they've actually failed often and they've recovered quickly. So that it's as much that second part that we're going to talk about is the recovery from that. Because I know, at least for me, starting off by making that one choice that led you down the wrong path, and then you don't course correct because you've already come this far. Let's keep going until it's the idea of digging the hole, and you keep digging and digging, and then you can't see over the top of the hole anymore. First thing that there's a quote out there that goes something along the lines of, I'm willing to help you, but you need to stop digging. And sometimes it's just a matter of realizing how far down that path you've come and being willing to see that there's another direction to go rather than keep digging down.
And I think that this stop digging is so important. I love that you mentioned that, Michael, because I was even watching a video yesterday where the speaker was giving some sort of seminar, and it came from the networking group, and it was something related to law of attraction, all those things. And then the woman was like, hey, you should not speak about the things you don't want in life. You should just speak about the things you want in life. And then the woman she was speaking to, the attendee to the seminar, was like, yeah, I really want this and that. But, and then she was speaking about conditions and present and everything related to that. And then the speaker, she actually came back like several times. And the woman was like, remembering, don't speak about what you don't want, speak just about what you want. And then she was like starting to speak again. And then it became extremely comical because the speaker even exaggerated a little bit, saying, pretending to be her, like pretending like she was speaking about what she wanted, and then she would wait for a few seconds and then just burst into speaking about the reality, the hardships, and all the challenges that she was facing. Because we just don't notice those are the patterns, the behaviors, the frequency that we have. And sometimes it might be confusing for the person that is in this situation, because I was in this situation. Sometimes you are on the frequency of digging. You are on the frequency of creating situations that are detrimental to yourself. Perhaps because that was the way in which the dynamics of your family home or something like that made you feel significant, like the person that causes problem, a person that is a victim, and many other behaviors that we might see there. And right now, this person might be an adult and don't realize that many things they do in life, it is detrimental. It's just digging deeper and deeper into self-sabotage.
Absolutely. And I can very much relate to that, as I've been in that space and there's these little small self-sabotage things that we're talking about, and those things sometimes can be really difficult to recover from as well. But some of what I really want to talk about at this point is those things that you've done that are, as I call them, cataclysmic. Those things that are so big that it forces the universe around you to reset in some way, shape, or form. So maybe that's a profession that you wanted to be in that you no longer can. Maybe it's a relationship that's really important to you that the sequence of actions have led to the complete breakdown of that relationship. Or maybe it's led to a point where they are in an accident where they've now lost physical functionality or potentially emotional functionality because of a poor choice that they've made. We're talking about things like getting a DUI, or even worse, that they were drunk while driving and actually got into an accident and injured or killed someone. Those are the kind of cataclysmic self-sabotage things that I'm talking about, because those are things that sometimes you may not see a way back from.
Yeah, let me share a nice example of something that I got so surprised with this. It's like unbelievable. And I believe that other people might hear this and don't understand how this is possible. And it's just, no, this guy is just stupid. What I did was this. I scored this meeting with VC. It's not a partner. She's partner today. She was an associate. VC is a venture capital. And I have those projects. So at this time, it was 2019. I didn't have them so well structured, but I got this meeting, and it was not to receive capital. It was to receive like a scholarship. They would evaluate if they would bring me to Sao Paulo, where I will be working in the structure of this VC, and they would just put me in contact with people, and they would give me like support, financial support for me to live in Sao Paulo. And I was like, great. And I had this meeting. And from the moment that this meeting was scheduled, I saw 7 p.m., 19, we here call 19 o'clock. So I saw 7 p.m. and I was very excited, and I got prepared and everything. And I looked several times, Michael, to the cell phone, and I was like 7 p.m., 7 p.m. And I always went home after the work. And this day I didn't went home. I went wandering around, and then I found a friend, and we started talking, and I received some callings, and I didn't answer the call. I was just like, no, I'm talking, I'm not going to answer. Unknown number. And then I went home, and I got home, and I opened my computer, very excited, 15 minutes early. I opened my email, and it was there like 2 emails from this woman saying, Bruno, I understand people can get late, but you should warn us, you should have warned us, and this and that. And like right now, I'm here terminating your application to our, they call it jetpack program, this program. And I was like destroyed, because I really saw 1 hour later. And I looked so many times to this. It's impressive to me, because I was looking there, the numbers, Michael. And for some reason, I saw 1 hour later. And if you ask me, Bruno, how is this possible? I'll tell you, I have no idea. I have no idea. But this is something that happened to me. And I was like, this is some sort of self-sabotage, because there's no other explanation. Am I going crazy? I'm thinking normal. Why would this happen? I don't know if you had an example so clear like that, but for me, this was some trick that my mind played with myself, just for being scared about this meeting, about the possibility of getting support, moving to another city like Sao Paulo. All those things were scary. And all those things might make your subconscious mind think, hey, what are you doing? And that's one of my experience with self-sabotage. Does it make sense to you, Michael? Do you think it was self-sabotage, or do you think it was something else?
So I can certainly see how that could be dropped into that level, is that it's almost cognitive change. So that's a belief, to me, that's a belief system that's come up and change the time in your head when you thought you were supposed to meet with this person. And I know I've done that as well, trying to get on a flight for somewhere and remembering that it leaves at 1 o'clock and it actually leaves at noon, and then being late and not making the flight. So I know that I've actually done that as well, because in my head it was 1 p.m. versus at noon, which is very different than the idea of I know when it is and I'm running late. So it's
Yeah.
some of the self-sabotage that I'm really getting at would almost be a little bit different style. So let's say that was a meeting that you were going to have at 8 o'clock in the morning the next day, and you decided to celebrate the night before and go out and hang with friends till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, knowing full well that you have this really important meeting the next day. And because you stayed out so late and actually were so active that you slept through your alarm and didn't make the meeting. That's more kind of what I'm talking about, is those things that you've made a choice, not realizing how bad the outcome could be, that would be that self-sabotage that we're talking about. No, it's the exact opposite of that first pillar of my coaching practice of preparation. You're doing the exact opposite. You're preparing for a failure rather than preparing for a success.
I understand. I understand what you're saying. It's a bit different. There was a level of more subconsciousness to what happened to me. And there was a level of decision making as well. Like I always went home after work, that specific day, I didn't went home. But I understand what you're saying. It's a more conscious process where you might be taken by the current, taken by the waves, and maybe be reactive and just being taken by things that are happening. But as they are happening, you are like, oh, I have this meeting tomorrow. I shouldn't be here. But either way, oh, let's allow things to happen. I understand what you're saying, though, yeah. And is dangerous as well, because we can be taken by our patterns, our frequencies again, and our habits without noticing.
And it's even something that we talked about in the Elevation Mindset Summit, of being able to elevate your habits. And habits, just like patterns or routines or beliefs, is each of those things, they by themselves are not good or bad. You can have a habit that serves you and a habit that doesn't. You can actually fall back into a pattern that actually is leading you to where you want to go, and one that's actually not. And it's tends to be, for me, whenever it's in that space of self-sabotage, tends to be whenever I'm on autopilot, whenever I am relying solely on those patterns rather than intentionally making a conscious choice. So that's really the thing that I want to make sure that we're aware of, is that sometimes we do get the blinders on and all we see is what's right in front of us, even though there may be other options. And for me, it actually went to the level of, I had a license to work in a profession, and I made choices in my life that now make that profession unavailable to me. So I actually got licensed as a massage therapist. And because now my legal record will not allow me to work in that profession anymore. That was my big goal. I had worked on it for 2 years. I wanted to teach. I was so excited about this. But at the same time, I feel for me that there's this underlying fear of actually doing something completely different, living a life in a different way, maybe being successful in this other space. Maybe it was the show. I've really done a lot of work around why this progression of steps happened. And now that I've been through that process, though, is I don't know if to actually lose something that you've worked a really long time for. And to the point that I really enjoy doing massage, but it's not something I can ever do professionally. So then how do we then resolve that disconnect? And even people I've spoken to before, during, after, is like, that sequence of events is not the character of who I am. It's where I was at the time. And getting to a place where we are aware that those actions, yes, is a huge red flag. It's this, for me, it's this stain, this branding on who I am. Not in a good way. It's like the scarlet letter level of branding. But that doesn't need to define where I'm going. It doesn't need to define who I am. It's something that was done. I've paid my price. I've actually gone through and done therapy. I've done deep inner work to figure out what the hell happened there, to then understand why this and this was so out of alignment, because I wasn't listening to my gut. I wasn't listening. Like you mentioned, is that little voice in your head that says, you shouldn't be doing this. I wasn't listening. And that to me is the pinnacle, the caricature of self-sabotage. When you do listen to that little voice that says, no, you shouldn't be doing this, or maybe you should do it this way, or gives you that little guidance, no, I got this. And it ends up being this event that is changing the whole direction of where you're going to go.
And losing a profession, the license to exercise a profession, is actually some very tangible loss. Usually our sabotages, they don't have a very tangible cost to us. Like, for example, this one that I told, I could have scored this scholarship, I don't know the proper name for it. It could have completely changed my life, but it was not something that I had in my possession. It was a chance. And usually the self-sabotage that we get involved with, they are more like this. We are losing things. We have the impression that we are losing things, but we don't actually know. And this kind of gives a doorway for us to feel good about it. Oh, but who says that I would win that thing? Like, who says that they would choose me? But when you lose something that you had, like the license to exercise a profession, that clearly makes you evaluate like your decisions, makes you stop and think, okay, perhaps my pattern that I maybe didn't even choose for myself is not serving me. There was someone, I don't remember who said that, but there was someone who said something like that. It's very hard for you to build a new routine and for you to get like new habits, new things going on. I even am studying a lot about this. It has a lot to do with setting up the environment, adding friction to the things that you don't want to be doing, and taking out friction from the things that you wish to be doing, even going as further as recognizing the routine that you want to cultivate in your life and creating purposeful rewards for yourself. Because what this person spoke about was, despite being so hard to set up these new habits, you just need to commit like a little slide, because when you slide, you go into the old routine. And the old routine is very strong. It is well built into your mind. So when you fall back just a little bit, it creates a domino effect that takes you automatic into other things that will activate other triggers and activate new routines. I recently found out, Michael, for example, that YouTube is like a place for you to get distracted. One of the purpose of cyber is to create a place like YouTube where instead of just getting distracted and people using the energy of your attention to profit, this energy is actually serving you. But the thing is that if I open a YouTube video, I tend to open a new one and a new one, and then I'm going like 1 hour watching YouTube videos. This is just a routine that I fall into. And it is hard for me to step out of this routine and actually do something that is productive. But the challenge is for you to start doing something productive, because this is this decision that takes a lot of energy. Because when you decide to do the productive thing, you then are on the routine of the productive thing. And it's not so costly anymore. It's not so heavy on you to do the work. You just change the routine. It's like there are doorways, and the doorways are cues. Whoever read The Power of Habit knows that the habit is built on cues, routines, and rewards. The doorways are cues that you encounter on your way. And the challenge is that when you enter a door, you enter into the automatic routine. But stopping this routine and opening a new door, this is the hard part. You need to be careful the doors you open, and you need to keep yourself opening productive doors and flagging very clearly on your mind the doors, like identifying them and flagging them like, hey, this is not a productive door. This is a door that leads me into a behavior that is not healthy. It's detrimental to my.
And that can be YouTube, that can be Netflix, that can be eating, that can be over exercising, that can be sex, it can be any number of things, drinking too much where after the first drink, it's all over from there. And knowing what those cascade triggers are for you is some of the work that I'm talking about doing. And knowing what sets you up to go down that cascade of events, and then doing your best to replace those with things that are going to be, as you said, a cascade of positive events. Is once you get the intuition for this thing, is it's something we talk about in the life book process quite a bit around the emotional side of things. Is there's a recipe for each person that's individual to them for them to feel a particular way. If that's actually a smell, if that's a sound of someone's voice, if it is physical touch, whatever those triggers are, that then will elicit a particular emotional response. And sometimes it takes us doing some of this inner work to actually discover what those things are. Asking those hard questions about what really makes me feel happy and joyful about my life. How do I feel fulfilled? Are those the emotions that I'm looking to create? Even that question alone is, for me, I want to feel fulfilled. That's one of the emotions that I'm in some ways chasing. But each person is different. Each person's recipe is unique to them. It's like a fingerprint, is knowing what those are. There are some things that are going to be fairly common patterns. Drinking yourself into oblivion generally does not lead yourself to feeling fulfilled in your life for most people. So what we're really talking about is trying to, I don't like that word trying, is doing the work to discover what emotions we want to create in our life, and then backtrack and figure out the recipe, the equations, the process, which may sound a little bit clinical, may sound a little bit overly objective rather than being subjective. And emotions very much are a subjective experience. But we know that seeing our ex that we haven't seen for forever, if we had a fight the last time we saw them, is going to bring up emotions that won't feel good, not actually potentially put us in the space where we want to be. But here's the thing, and this is where that self-sabotage piece comes in. And there's a movie out there called What the Bleep Do We Know? And one of the things that they talk about is the idea of not just addiction for things like smoking or drinking or sex, but even those things like drama or appreciation, or we've talked about before about the me person, being acknowledged for what you're doing. All of those can be an addiction when we've actually learned a pattern where this is how we get fulfilled, by someone else giving us that appreciation, or being on stage and getting the standing ovation, or whatever that is that feeds us. Is learning what is pulling us towards our vision versus what is distracting us in order to play into those addictions that we more than likely learned at an early age, which you actually mentioned as well earlier, Bruno, is that pattern, that lock that you have that has a particular key that goes into it. And maybe it is gossiping. Maybe it's gossiping that is what it is for you, or maybe it is serial monogamy. Maybe that's what it is. That feeling of newness in a relationship is what really gets you going. But then do you have more of a longer fulfilled life in a partnership, in a relationship with someone? Is that what you're going for? But then are you falling back onto these habits that, once again, is that self-sabotage, is those steps that you knew that you have taken the last 3 relationships that you were in that led to that relationship ending? So why are you still following that same pattern of taking those actions, having those same conversations, doing those same things that you have seen time and time again erodes a relationship? So why are you still doing them? Is it because you don't have the right partner? It's their fault that they just need to deal with the way that you're doing things? Or is it a matter of relearning for yourself how to come into that relationship? Because I've also had significant relationships in my life end as well. And it's a matter of doing that deep inner work to actually discover, why am I doing these things? What is the underlying, in life book speak, it's the premise. What's the foundational belief underneath all of these beliefs? If I tear off the layers of this belief of society and culture and media and my family and all these things, is what's really the belief underneath that? And then let's play from that place. And maybe that needs to be adjusted. Maybe that needs to be refined. Maybe it needs to be wiped out and replaced with something new. But this, to me, is many of the triggers for me that have led to this cataclysmic cascade of events.
And those triggers that you say, Michael, it's a good word. When I first started hearing about triggers, I didn't like that much. I believe that this, as men, is a tendency because for me, I first heard about that with the women community, talking about sexual inappropriate behavior and things like that. And I was like, oh, okay. But then later I started to understand that actually this is something that is very present in us as humans. We are triggered all the time. We all, be you yourself a woman, be yourself a man, we are all triggered all the time. And those triggers, they are like the doors that I mentioned before. Oh, we see the door, we tend to open. And those triggers, they might be emotional, or they might be cues for habits, entire routines that when they happen, we just dive into them. And the moment, this is so important to be understood because the moment the trigger happens and your brain starts to engage in a routine, it is unconscious. You get into the autopilot. It's like you getting your Instagram. I don't know if this happened to you. It happened to me a few times already. I get into my Instagram. Today it happens less because I protected myself from this pattern. But what would happen before would be that I would have to send a message, for example, to Michael, and I would get into my Instagram, and I would, before I went into the direct message to send Michael, for example, a message, I would see a story of someone that I like to engage with. And then I was just like, oh, automatically, poof, click there and start seeing stories. And then I would see what I wanted to see. I would see a little bit more because it's automatic. And then I would come back to consciousness and close the app and sometimes even lock my phone. And then I was like, oh, I was going to do something. And I remember, oh, it's a message. Who I was going to send the message to? Because it is unconscious. You get into a pattern, and it's very important. Michael spoke about something about understanding, being mindful of yourself, and that this might sound too clinical, right, Michael? This process of dissecting your routine, yourself, your behavior. But this is important. If you wish to live an intentional life, if you wish to be a actualized person, that you decide, I want to live those experiences, and you actually manifest those experiences in your life, it is possible. But it is necessary to understand that we probably did not grow in a culturescape with peers in a culture that manifests those behaviors we wish to live naturally. So we need to dissect the behaviors that we acquired unconsciously by observing, by mimicking, by learning how to survive, because our body reads everything that happens around us as something intrinsically related to survival. If people act this way around us, it's because it's safe. So we need to act this way. This is very deep inside our evolution. So we need to dissect those things, understand why they are there, and then recreate the routines, the behavior, the habits that we wish to cultivate, and that will actually manifest the things that the experiences that we wish in life. It's entirely possible. We just need to be mindful. And it is not easy. I don't think it is easy, Michael. I don't know if you think it is easy. It's like you've been bounded, you've been shackled, you've been, like Michael said, sometimes you are even branded because you manifested behaviors that society, they don't approve, and they might brand you. And today we have the cancellation culture, which I believe it's totally harmful. There are some videos of philosophy talking about it. Do a research, look for it. People that tend to cancel other people, they are doing much more harm than good. It's much better for you to help the person to transform themselves, to find redemption, right? Than to cancel the person, because canceling culture is like killing, it's like a death culture. When you cancel someone, you are killing that person. For society, even for themselves, they might understand like being rejected by a group is like death. So it's something very serious, and it does much more harm than good. But either way, despite the fact that you might dig until you don't see an exit that is an exit. There are ways for you to build different behaviors in life that can help you get out of those situations and those loops, those frequencies that might be holding you in a place that is not good for you.
And that's, you mentioned that process may not necessarily be easy. And I would agree with that,
Yeah.
that it very much is not an easy process. And also, many times, yes, it is a lot of deep inner work that's required to get through some of that stuff. But depending on where you're at in this spiral, may require outside help. So if you find that you are in these patterns that are not leading you to where you want to go, seeking help for that can be something like a therapist, if that's where you're at. Maybe it's even a support group. For me, that support group was a men's team. So I was able to connect with them on a level that I hadn't been able to connect with in other parts of life. There's also other structures around that too that I've had to go through, because even with some of these choices, that was a choice for me that happened 15 years ago. But there's still some of this regret, shame, and guilt that comes up whenever I think about it. But the ironic part is, as powerful as those emotions are, there's no transformational value for them. It tends to keep us in that space of regret, shame, and guilt. It's and that's something that I've struggled with for quite a bit of time, and it's why I've found ways to overcome those things and actually be able to get beyond them and do my best with the resources and knowledge I have at the time, which is a huge driver for me. Is there are things that I won't be able to do, and I need to accept that. But then there's a whole lot that I can do. But if as we talked about last week, and when we were talking about affirmations, we're focusing only on those things that we can't do, and that's where we get stuck. That's what I'm talking about, is that there's no transformational value for them. Because if you're just stuck in that, all the things that I can't do now because of what I did, that's where you stay in the past rather than being available for what's possible in your present. So for me, the tools that I've been using are things like forgiveness, gratitude, compassion, which to me have had transformational value for myself as well as for other people around me. And the way that shows up for me is in meditation. I do the 6 phase meditation, with one aspect of that is forgiveness. And they found in, what was it, the 40 years of Zen, I believe was the research that they did, that forgiveness has the highest impact on brainwave shifting from lower levels to higher levels when you're looking at forgiveness. And for me, the hardest wasn't forgiving other people, it was actually forgiving myself, because I've seen the fallout for what happened for some of my choices and the people that I've hurt in that process. So sometimes redemption may be nice in some situations, but for me, it's about the inner core, the space, that the person that I get to lay down next to every night is actually me, for sure, 100% of the time. There's never a time I'm not going to fall asleep with me. So that's the person that needs to be okay with what I'm doing now. So through those things, I can grow as I show compassion towards other people, be able to put myself in their shoes and actually say, I can understand how they could possibly do that. I may not condone it, but I can understand why they would go there. That's also part of forgiveness. It's not condoning and saying, yes, that's the right thing to do. It's actually saying, I can understand how someone could get there. I understand now the cycles of addiction more so than I ever did before that, because I was in it myself. And until I've actually been to something even close to what somebody else has actually been through, it's really hard for me to have compassion for what they've been in. And then the third one is appreciation. Appreciation to me helps us get away from this idea of sabotage. When you appreciate what you have, you're less likely to make choices that you're going to lose them. When you express that to people in your life, that you appreciate who they are, specifically, thank you for being like this and doing this with me, has a huge transformational value in my life and has helped forge relationships that may not have been there if that wasn't. And especially whenever I've had major relationships in my life end because of poor choices on my part, I go out of my way to make sure that the people I care about know that I do.
It is like compassion, forgiveness, and gratitude. And you know what I noticed, Michael? Those are the three first phases of the 6-phase meditation, right? Yeah. Have you noticed that?
I have, yes. So they are some of the most powerful emotions we can have on the planet. They are love being at the very top. And I wasn't actually thinking about that whenever I actually was coming out with that, but absolutely, those are the things that are transformative for us as human beings.
We are gonna put this video for the 6-phase meditation in the description as well for you to take a look, because it's a very powerful meditation. And it starts like the first 3 phases is for you to exercise compassion, then you exercise forgiveness, I believe, and then gratitude, or it's the contrary, right? Gratitude and forgiveness. And remember when we talked about meditation for the first time, we told you that meditation is exercising consciousness. So you might be exercising your consciousness about your breath, but you also might be exercising your consciousness about some emotions, some states. And that's exactly what those 3 first stages are. You exercise, how can I feel compassion? How can I feel love? How can I feel connected to other people and empathy, all that. And then you go into the gratitude, which is appreciation. And then you go into gratitude and you exercise, how can I feel grateful? And then you go into forgiveness. And forgiveness is very important. I had many problems to forgive myself. I had to forgive myself a lot. I had to struggle a lot with self-judgment. And I even want to talk to you, Michael. You mentioned regret, shame, and guilt as negative things that have no positive value to you. And I want to tap into if self-judgment goes into that. But before we go there, forgiveness, the self-forgiveness, forgiving yourself. It's so important. There is no value for you to be condemning yourself. I believe that's the word, like for you to be condemning yourself. Yeah. There is no value for you to do that because, and as Michael said, we sleep with ourselves every day. So we need to be okay with ourselves. I like to say this in a different way. I like to say the person that you have the most influence over is yourself, because the person that you have the most conversation, that you talk the most, that you have more conversations with, is yourself. We are always running in our minds, and this is feeding our beliefs. This is feeding our subconscious mind. This is setting some purpose for ourselves. So we have a huge influence over ourselves. So there's no reason for you to not forgive yourself for any mistake that you have made. I have made mistakes, like I have mentioned before, that I had to go into a journey to learn how to deal with women and everything, because I totally didn't know how to do anything related to that until I was like 20 something years old. And I discovered self-development, because it was not that I didn't know how to deal with women only. I didn't know how to talk, how to deal with people. I didn't have the opportunity to develop those skills. But I remember the first time that I decided to approach a woman that I fancy. Like I live in downtown, and there was this shoe store, and there was this very beautiful woman there that I saw many times. And I was like, oh, I wish I knew this woman. And then I decided to approach this woman one day, Michael. And it was so shameful. I did so many things wrong. And she was totally okay. But in my head, I was doing a terrible job. And then I was nearby a gym, and there was this high place there. And we were below on the street. And there was a moment where I just gave up, and I looked at her and I was like, that is going terrible. And she just looked at me and yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go now. And she was like, okay. And when I say that, I just started hearing the burst of laughter, and I didn't realize, but above us, that was where the gym, they put out the treadmills, and there was like a bunch of women there hearing everything. And I just wanted to dig a hole and put myself inside there and never go back out of it. And that was a terrible feeling. But there is no reason for you to condemn yourself because of an experience like that, because our first experiences, particularly if you are starting too far behind, if you didn't had the chance to develop the skills necessary to do what you want to do, there is no reason for you to not forgive yourself. And some areas of our lives, they have more judgment over it. This area of a man knowing how to approach a woman, this is something that every man should know. Like, how can you not know, like 20 something years old, and you don't know how to approach a woman? What's wrong with you? And then there is a lot of judgment and things like that. And there is no reason for that. Everyone has their story, everyone has their path, everyone has like their experiences in life. And sometimes, yes, sometimes our experiences leads us into making wrong decisions. Our experiences leads us into having behaviors that society might shame and might judge and things like that. But the last person that should hold your experiences against you is yourself. Always be compassionate with yourself. Always forgive yourself, because you have an entire life ahead of you. This is the thing that matters. It matters that now you might be in a different perspective. You might see things on a different angle, and you might have cultivated beliefs and experiences that leads you not to committing the same mistakes, not to falling on the same traps. And from now on, you are a different person. You can manifest different experiences in your life. But giving a pause here and going back into that self-judgment thing, what do you think about the self-judgment, Michael? Does it fit into this category of things that don't have a transformative value, or does self-judgment have it? And just to pinpoint, I'm asking because I struggle a lot with self-judgment.
So I certainly think assessing what we're doing is important. So like for me, the word judgment is an ambiguous word. It can be positive or negative. And it's that idea of really taking a situation and seeing what the lessons are in it. And you touched on that a little bit, is that where self-sabotage comes into place in versus this idea of self-judgment and how it plays out is if you're making the same choice over and over again, and it's actually leading you down the wrong path over and over again, and you're not learning from making that choice over and over again, that then is a trigger to look at, why am I doing this? And that's where some discernment is. I do this, I get this outcome. I keep doing this and I get this outcome. I want a different outcome, so I need to stop doing this or do something different. So it's not necessarily that these choices that we're making are bad by themselves, and I don't want to apply that kind of judgment to it. It's more a matter for me of, this is the cause and this is the effect. I make this choice, I get this outcome. And if you want a different outcome, you've got to back it up and actually do that assessment and say, okay, if I do things like this with these kind of people in these places and with this resources and from this approach, I keep getting this outcome, go back and change your approach. Maybe change your goal, maybe look at your intention, maybe check in on your beliefs, maybe figure out, maybe that's not the route you want to go, that's not the place you want to be, the people you want to do it with, or the tactics you want to take. And doing that kind of, in some ways, an after action review. And that's, to me, I think some of the power of some of the work that I've done personally is, I made that mistake. I will never make that mistake again. That's something that I promised to, if you want to call it God, the universe, my soul, my higher self, whatever you want to call it, that is never going to happen again. There is some judgment around that. Yes, that is not okay. That is never okay and never will be okay. So then I need to back it up and look at the choices that led to that. Look at the actions that were taken that led to that, and start back here. It's not just about this end result. It's a matter of looking at the progress. It's not just looking at the symptom, it's actually looking at the cause, looking at drilling back into history and patterns and beliefs, and apply a pattern interrupt if I ever get into that space again. And that's the work that is done. That's the deeper level of work, is following it back to see where did that start, and then change the path. If you drive by a certain market, and every single time you drive by that market, you're going to buy a half gallon of ice cream and take it home and eat it all, and that's not something you want to do, don't drive by that market. Make that choice different. Maybe you take a detour, and maybe in a couple of minutes out of the way, but is that worth it to you to not have the result of eating a half gallon of ice cream all by yourself? And I know that may be a little bit flippant, but that's the level that I'm talking about looking at this, especially from these bigger choices that can have such an impact on us. So is self-judgment bad? No, I don't think that judging our progress, tracking our progress is a bad thing. It's when we apply a judgment that doesn't serve us. If we apply a judgment of that was shameful to do that, which is one of the things that you said in that situation, that what you did was so shameful, but it wasn't. You were maybe awkward. It was maybe the first time that you did this, and maybe it was uncomfortable, but should you be ashamed because you approached someone that you thought you were attracted to this person? It was a trial. It was a experiment. It was seeing if this was an engagement that you could have, and practicing a skill. I don't feel ashamed if I get on a bike for the first time and I fall off of it. I don't feel ashamed if I pick up a pencil for the first time and I can't write my name fully, like the fourth and fifth graders. That's in essence what we're talking about. So it comes down to one of my favorite quotes of, if you judge a fish by the way it can climb a ladder, you'll think it's an idiot for the rest of its life. Be mindful of where you're at on this process, because I think that in the areas of development that there are for emotional and intellectual and physical and spiritual and cognitive levels and logic levels, each of those is a different area of development, and each of us have actually gone up a certain level in that over time. And I'm in no place to judge someone who has not practiced emotional intelligence on how emotionally intelligent that they are. They haven't been trained, if they haven't practiced, if they haven't learned a way to do it, in the same fashion that I'm not going to judge my daughter because she doesn't know how to program, because she's never tried to program, she's never tried to learn it. Or if someone has a disability like autism, I'm not going to judge them because of the limitations that they have, because of that, at all, in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to appreciate that person has challenges that I don't. And I have challenges where they don't. And it's a matter of, that's where the judgment thing is a challenging place, is I'm not competing with you, Bruno, on how well you do marketing, because that's not my gig. That's not my thing. The same fashion that I hope you don't judge me for how I program or how I coach, because that's not what you do. Because that kind of judgment, I think, can actually be very detrimental. But can I help support you in what you're doing? I think that's a valuable gift, a packet of generosity that I can give to you, if there's some wisdom that I can impart to you. The same fashion that I would ask that of other people, is we all have some wisdom in our area because of the experiences that we've had into our life. And some of those are great experiences that we really enjoyed while we were doing it. And some of those really horrible experiences that we hated while we were going through it, but we still have the same level of wisdom of how we actually got there. So in some ways, that kind of judgment, I don't think is seeing somebody as lesser because they did this act in a particular time. If someone's out as a serial murderer, that's got to be stopped. There are someone who is serially doing things time and time again and are not willing to shift that trajectory. There are consequences for every choice that we make. The question is, do the consequences match the original action?
The thing about the judgment, wrapping my mind around what you just said, because it was a lot of information, but then what I got was, it is useful for you to do some self-judgment if you are in an investigative approach, perspective, trying to understand, like, why did I do that? Like questioning what leads me to that. Are those actions worthy? Are those actions something that I wish to be engaging in? Or is the result not being good for me and all that? And because what I really associate with the self-judgment is what you said about, for example, shame, which is one of the worst things, emotions, I don't know, that we can have. Shame is really something that you should never shame anybody, particularly a child, and because they really record that. And when you self-judge, when I usually associate with self-judgment, is actually this frequency of shame, of criticizing yourself for something that you did, not actually trying to fix that behavior, but putting shame, guilt, and all those things that we mentioned over that behavior that you might be manifesting, sometimes even naturally, like by habit, by triggers in the environment, and then you go and you manifest some behavior, and bang, later you are like, oh, self-judgment. And what I realized, Michael, something I realized about self-sabotage, I realized recently, is that it's deeply related to this acceptance of the group, the survival mechanism that we have. Anything that we manifest that might trigger rejection from the group disapproving us, the group shaming us, the group putting some guilt on us, anything that might lead our subconscious mind to feel that we are at risk of being rejected by manifesting that behavior, our subconscious mind will work for us not to manifest that behavior again. So you might be consciously trying to do something, and you might be consciously making decisions, and then your subconscious mind will be sabotaging you. It will be putting you into other direction and being on your way. And another thing that it might do that I'm realizing is that when you do something that your peers might reject, later your subconscious mind will be bringing that memory back, like you did this. And it is, I believe that we even spoke about this before. It is sometimes the judgment, the self-judgment, it's just a frequency. Oh, we didn't spoke about that in the podcast. I actually made text about it. And it was like self-judgment, sometimes it doesn't even come with words like you criticizing yourself, but it comes in a frequency. You just remember the situation, and there is this frequency, this aura, this feeling of judgment over it. And this might be because your mind is thinking, hey, remember this behavior? I think that the group didn't like it. I think that they might reject us. I think that we are at risk. Remember that. Think about this. And then you go think about other thing, and your subconscious mind brings that memory again. Hey, I think that you really need to think about that. And that is not a good to, not on this way. I love the way you presented it. Do it as an exercise of mindfulness, of comprehension, of self-compassion, of self-forgiveness, of understanding why have I manifested this behavior, and how could I improve my mechanisms, my routines, my habits, in order for me to change this behavior for something more healthy. Because something that we can even speak more later is that habits, they are not like, it's hard for you to dump a habit and just get a new one. It's much better for you to try to change the habits that you have, change the routines, and make the same triggers, the same rewards that you already are familiarized with, a different routine, learning a different routine for them. Yes. Do you have anything else to wrap up, Michael? I think that we have a nice run over self-sabotage. I feel like we can even speak more about this on the future, but I think that we discussed some interesting aspects about it.
Absolutely. So I think that we wrapped it up for today. And in a lot of this, it's, as Bruno captured, is learn from those things, learn from the choices that you make, and then see where you can take it from there. We've talked a little bit about fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Fixed mindset is staying in that habit and complaining about your results, continuing to do the same thing over and over again. the growth mindset is being willing to change your actions to get a different outcome. And we appreciate you spending this time with us. We hope to see you in the future on our future podcasts, where we're going to be talking about all kinds of things that allow you to elevate your best. And my name is Michael Dankloffs.
I'm Bruno Martins. Thank you for being here. I love having those conversations. And don't forget, never forget, subscribe. If you take any value of this, if you think that discussing those topics is something interesting, subscribe, hit the like button, and allow you to recommend our videos back again to you so you can come back and enjoy new conversations that we have. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, Michael, and have a nice week.
Everyone, have a great week, and we'll see you next week. See you later. Bye.